Basically, the question was around best practices around RBAC permissions, scope tags versus admin units or other ways. Um, Role-based access in Intune, I I'll leave that to you, Andrew. You know more about that than I do.
So scope tags versus admin units. If you need to put role-based access in place for both Intune and Entra, you will need both. So, Johan, would you mind at least bringing up the Intune Admin Center real quick?
I know, guy. Yeah, that can be done.
All right. And then head over to tenant administration.
Yes, sir.
And then roles, because there are a couple of components to role-based access in Intune. So first you have your roles, your various roles here, plenty of built-in roles, but you can also create your own custom roles. And then your scope tags, off to the left if you want to browse over to scope tags real quick. These, thank you. Scope tags are used to just tag various resources in Intune. That can be devices, that can be configuration profiles, that can be applications. Most resources in Intune can be tagged. Not all of them, but most of them can be. And what you can use scope tags to do is basically define what sets of resources users or administrators can actually see or perform some action against, depending on the rights or the permissions that you provide them. And so the way that we configure that, we can actually set these scope tags. We can assign these scope tags to a group of devices so that devices can be tagged. So for example, if I am just dealing with devices in the marketing department, we could tag all of those devices with the marketing scope tag. And then if I'm assigned a specific role, I would only see marketing devices, which would leave sales devices, IT, HR, and everything completely out of my view. I don't have permissions to those because I don't have that scope tag assigned. So we can assign these to computers as well. And then, Johan, if you pop back over to our roles, and then we can click on any role probably.
All right, I'm clicking any role.
Perfect. And then we can go to assignments. So the roles themselves, would you mind clicking on assign, please? I'm pretty impressed with myself, honestly. I've talked through this once or twice. Normally you don't hear me say that. So we go ahead, and Johan provided a name here. I do want to point out that when you set up a name right here, that's just for the role assignment itself. You're typically not really going to do anything with this. This doesn't have anything to do with the role or the scope tags or anything. It's just the role assignment. And once you give it a name, if you go to the next tab there, then we set up a group of users that we want to be able to view information or perform some action. So we're actually assigning this role to a group of users. So
This
great
is
right there.
This is a group of users.
Yep. So in this case, Johan's just got a group called Field Sales Reviewers. And then if we go to the next page, this is where we actually set the scope group, which is the group of devices that we assigned the scope to. So admin groups, that's your users. Those are your administrators that need to perform some action. Scope groups, these are going to be your devices that you can actually see and perform some action against or view information about. And then the third tab are the scope tags that you'll be assigned to. So basically you've got the group of admins, the group of devices, and the label itself. And with those three things, you bring together all of the role-based access on the Intune side of things.
All right, brilliant.
And then on the Entra side of things, I'm not sure that we can actually walk through this full thing, but if we go over to the Entra Admin Center,
Give me a moment.
This is a lot different than just looking at my normal monitor every week. All right, and then if you could click Show More off to the left.
Mm-hmm.
Identity governance, is it under there? We want to find admin units. Anybody remember what section admin units is under? Might be under... Oh, you can also probably just search for it, Johan, at the top. Yep, administrative units. Roles and admins, perfect. Oh, look, you do have one there. So if you click on that one that you have created there, what we can do with an admin unit is just a logical grouping of objects in Entra. So we can group together users, we can group together groups, or we can group together devices. And then we can assign Entra permissions. The reason that I say we have to have role-based access in place for both Entra and Intune is that things like the BitLocker recovery key or the lapse password, if you're escrowing those to Entra, they're stored in the Entra computer object, not the Intune computer object. So we have to provide some level of access to Entra as well. So if we were, for example, to add some devices in here into this admin unit, we could add those devices in and then assign the cloud device administrator role here, for example. And that is going to allow our admins to be able to perform some action against those Entra device objects. So we can actually recover a BitLocker recovery key. We can recover a lapse password, or we can disable and delete the object if we need to do that. So those two components together kind of give you the full picture of role-based access between the two systems. It's not entirely dissimilar to how we do things in Config Manager and Active Directory today. Something that really helped me understand this when I was first working through admin units was I just started to think of this as like an OU. I've worked with OUs for a long time, and it's not exactly the same concept, but in a way it is. It's just a logical grouping of these objects. And then once I kind of understood that, then it made things a little bit easier, and I was able to draw that parallel between the two systems.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, great question. Oh, yep, we got a question here in the room.
All right.
So related follow-up to that. So I'm in education, and we are just starting to look at going cloud native. In Config Manager, I've done role-based access based on computer names to separate everything out, and multiple times in multiple sessions, I've heard computer names don't matter going cloud native. So thinking ahead to how do I then delegate access to specific devices coming out of autopilot, like what methods are there to do that?
That is a great question. If you don't know, I'm also in higher ed. So anytime these days I hear that name does not matter, I reject that notion, at least at this point in time. Naming, while challenging, especially if you're trying to get everybody to agree to a naming convention across your entire organization, I've found is, in my opinion, the easiest way to group things together in Entra. Now, when you are going cloud native, the naming can get a little bit more complicated. If you're using autopilot, you have a couple of basic naming options in the deployment profile, so you can go that route. But sometimes you may just need to rename your device after the fact. Renaming a cloud native device, we talked a little bit in with Michael Niehaus on Monday in our autopilot session. Renaming a cloud native device is pretty straightforward, as long as you're not dealing with device certificates. So these days, my answer is still name your devices however you'd like them to be grouped. So if you have, for example, I'll just use departments again. If we wanted a specific department to, let's say the sales department is SAL, prepended with SAL dash whatever, we can write dynamic device queries pretty easily to handle that. And those dynamic device queries will work both for Entra groups as well as the admin units that we were talking about. I'm starting to see things around like custom security attributes and things like that, but and I think there's a lot of useful stuff that you can do there, but then you're starting to complicate things a little bit more. I shouldn't say complicate, but make them a little bit more complex. You're going to have to build some more automation around that. So
yeah, and I mean for Intune groups, you do have some additional options there as well, where you can group machines into things like a purchase order that have to match on the device. There is another object called. Let's see. I'll bring up that group again. The correlation ID that is part of the profile. That one you can group devices within. So there are other options available to group things together. But I mean, naming goes a long way. That's why when we do, I showed you that sequence earlier when we did autopilot registration as part of our imaging. We have a script on the server side that runs that, and part of that script is that we actually do assignment of the device. We are actually setting the computer name to what, in this case, what MDT happens to be setting, or PSD happen to be set, but whatever you want, because the autopilot naming templates are very, very limited. But through scripts and graph, you can name them whatever. I tend to like it when I enroll them, but there's nothing that prevents you to do that rename after the fact. So yeah, just different options.
Right. So I had a question. So with tenant attach and co-management, there's a way that you can tenant attach and sync server devices to Intune. And with co-management, you can do some pretty interesting stuff. You can maybe run scripts against servers. So with scope tags, I'm wondering, since servers aren't natively managed in Intune, will scope tags actually take effect on a server? So I can like filter them out.
So servers in Intune are never enrolled per se in Intune. I don't. I don't know.
in one of your tenants, you have an object, at least a tenant attached, maybe a distribution point or something like that you have available in Intune.
I may have.
I've seen your tenant too many times.
Is that so? All right. Here is. But this is a command. This is a tenant attached object. Yes. Here.
And can we actually see the properties of that?
You can try it. But no true properties. No.
Yeah. So I think that will answer the question. Since it's not enrolled, we won't have the ability to use those scope tags. Because you would actually see, like, Johan, would you mind going over to just a regular Intune device object, Intune enrolled?
Yes, sir. I will even pick a compliant one for you. How about that?
Perfect. And then if we go to the properties section there, that's where you're going to see your scope tags typically. Yeah. Yeah.
So anyone with a default tag is running if they're coming in.
Yeah, so I don't know that they would, maybe. So when you're doing, when you have a tenant attach config manager site, that is by default just going to follow the permissions that you have in config manager. So if I only have permissions in Intune and I log into the tenant, and let's say even if I'm just an Intune admin or something along those lines, I'm not necessarily going to see all of those tenant attached devices.
I mean, if I click this one here, and try to do something creative, like running a CM pivot query or whatever I want to do against this server, even though I am a global admin in Intune, by default, this is going to downright fail.
Yep.
If I pick, let's see what I have here. I can borrow. Usually keep a collection around with good queries to run disk space. How about disk space? So if I run this, it's going to fail, and it's going to fail fairly quickly. And it basically says, make sure you have enough permissions in config manager. And I don't sync I don't sync admin accounts over. I have some lesser admin accounts I sync over, like in my config manager environment here. I have a user named where are we here? On-prem Johan. Here, this is an account that I do sync through Entra Connect, and I'm giving that account the CM Pivot admin security role in config manager. That's the key. It's a synced account, and it has permissions in config manager. So if I go into the same tenant, but this time I will be logged in as on-prem Johan rather than a global admin, and wait patiently. So I'm logged in as on-prem Johan. You see that up here. And if I go to the same device, and try to run the same query, it should not fail. My personal best is the result within 20 seconds. My average is usually around 30. So we can see what we're doing here. It's been running for 6-7 seconds now.
While we're waiting for that, Johan, I think we have a follow-up. Did you have something else you want to add?
Yeah, just to that. So we don't have admin rules in Intune from on-prem. We don't allow that. So our accounts are all cloud-based accounts. And so what we did is in Mecum, we turned off the RBAC role from Mecum to be honored. And then in Intune, we configured it so it's Intune managed for RBAC.
Okay.
Okay, so at that point, we have anyone that has Intune rules permissions to run an action for co-management, they can do something. So that's what I was worried about the servers.
Yeah, there is an option to turn off, but in this case, I have in the default behavior where the user needs to have config manager access, because it's technically Intune telling config manager to tell its agent to do some work. And as you can see here, I got a result within like 25 seconds, which is pretty dang good. The only requirement is obviously that particular server that you work with, it better be online. Otherwise, there will be no reply. So no, that was a good question. Great question.